All right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your hosts. I am Marcos Conan Negron, and beside me here, as always, is Ben the Jet Retz. Ben, how you doing, brother?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Had another nice week. I'm juiced up, obviously, for what we're going to be talking about today because we got a lot of Kings and a lot of Eagles and a lot of maybe not so much Niners, but a good amount of Niners. We got some
Yeah.
stuff to break down today. So before we get into that, for those who are audio listeners and want to listen to us or see our pretty faces, come check us out on YouTube. You can find us at the Behind the Back podcast where we record all of our episodes every week. So if you have a chance, go ahead and check us out there. Outside of that, let's get down to business. So we're going to talk Kings and their 2-1 week so far, and we're going to break down some free agency that's been happening. Now the NFL, the new league year has begun. So let's keep it basketball to start. And it was kind of a crappy start on Sunday, and we lost to the Houston Rockets. And before we really kind of get into it, prayers up for Şengün, who took a pretty nasty tumble at the about 2.5 minutes left in the game. Now, there's been reports that have come out that he avoided major injury. He's just has, I mean, as major as it could have been. He has a severe ankle sprain that's probably going to keep him out the rest of the year. And I think they said a bone bruise for his knee. But the main takeaway was that we lost. And it felt like we had good momentum at first, and we were kind of taking it to them with the physicality. And I don't know, we got sloppy and let the game get away from us. What were some of the main takeaways that you noticed from that game?
Honestly, the big one that just stands out is just it's kind of what we've been talking about. This team plays to the level of their opponent, and that's really good in a playoff scenario, but it's really bad when you're fighting for playoff seeding. And so, like when I look at when we were looking at this last stretch of the season, it looked really favorable because we had a lot of home games and against favorable opponents. Like we got through the initial tough stretch coming out of the All-Star break,
Mm-hmm.
and you started to see these games where it's like this is winnable, and you could stack some wins here. And unfortunate games like this happened against the Rockets where we were finally tooled up, meaning we had De'Aaron Fox for the first time against the Rockets this year, and we didn't have him in the first two matchups because we played, I think it was a back-to-back on the first matchup.
Yeah,
Um,
correct.
and so he was injured there, but he's back, and so you're expecting this win, and they came out and they played to the same level of the Rockets, and the Rockets really they showed up. I mean, there's no doubt about it, and you got to hand it to them there, but you can't shoot 6 of 32 from three and expect to win, especially when you're a live and die by the three ball.
Yeah, I thought there were some good things I liked in this game. Like Domas did a really good job. He had another nasty double double in this one. I think it was 25, 15, and 8. And I do think that this was one of those games that, yes, we had De'Aaron Fox, but it felt like we could have needed him just a little bit more like takeover in this one. I think the Rockets, the way they're structured, they just have a lot of really good wings, and Freddie was making some pretty dumb shots in this game. I was kind of upset with, like, he was making some tough shots, and when teams do that against us, it's always hard to beat those kind of teams who are kind of feeling it that day. So um I like the physicality we had in the first half, but once we got to the second half, we had 14 points in the third quarter. Like, our offense fell apart. We turned the ball over. Just didn't seem like we had any rhythm at all whatsoever. So that definitely, going into the fourth quarter, we both kind of felt like there wasn't really a chance. Like, we both kind of said it going into it. We're like, this doesn't feel like a game we're gonna win.
Yeah, definitely. There's a scenario that plays out in each Kings game, and I'm finding it more and more often where we'll get a lead or we'll find a rhythm, and it's like, wow, like we could actually steamroll this team, or we could at least pull off this game, whether it's one that we should win or not. And then we've seen pretty often this year they just kind of collapse. And Deuce Deuce Mason, I believe is his name. I'm really bad with that guy's name, but
No, you're right.
he's a Kings analyst, and he's one of the co-hosts for the pregame postgame show for NBC Sports. He had this awesome take about the Kings where and he's broke it down a few times this year. they will let teams go on runs against them, and they won't slow the bleeding. Like, it's one thing to stop the
Yeah.
bleeding, but it's another to at least get a few buckets here and there to at least slow it down a little bit, and at least, let your opponent know that you're on the other end of the court too.
Yeah.
And that's one thing with this Kings team that we see too many times this year. It's just I don't know if it's a lack of focus or they're too comfortable being, playing from behind. But there's something that happens where the sense of urgency to go and get a bucket when you really need it, just it doesn't seem like it's there. And so then you have these runs where one team scores 32 points and you have like 2 or 4 points, and it's just like, holy cow, like we can't let that kind of thing happen. That's how you lose games, and don't look back.
Yeah, agreed. And I do find that at times I noticed this year, especially with the Kings, that like we have had those runs happen to us, but we don't really provide those same kind of runs to the other teams. Our runs are usually, you know, consist of like 14 points, like, oh, 14 to 2, or maybe at most like 16 to 2, 16 to 4. And and then after that, the opponent shoots like three threes and they're right back in the game. So it's like, it's fortunately in these next couple games that we're going to talk about, we noticed a way that they were just able to develop a big run and stay consistent on the defensive end. I think that's where Mike Brown alluded to this, and I think I think it was last night actually against the Lakers, where he's like, what this team's been trying to figure out is when teams go on this run in the NBA, when you're a player, you feel this anxiety that that like shots that you're taking when you're up 15 and 20 and you're on a roll, when another team, when you can sense that they're coming, that anxiety kicks in and then you start missing shots and all of a sudden there's even more. And he's like, we've needed to try to find a way to put that anxiety onto defense and to getting that urgency. And we'll transition here off of the Houston game, and we really saw that kind of sense of urgency and physicality in the Milwaukee game, where we just absolutely dusted them. We beat them by like what, 30-ish, like it was like right up. We whatever it was a gigantic blowout, and I was really happy to see the level of kind of focus there was in this game. And we didn't even have Keegan in this game. We had Keegan. Keegan was out. Keon Ellis was in the starting lineup, and I just thought that it was a really good team game, and our stars really showed up in this one. De'Aaron and Domas made their presence felt. Um, what did you like from this game from Milwaukee?
Honestly, top to bottom, the entire game was what we've expected and wanted to expect from this team all year. We saw a lot of consistency throughout this game, and that to me was just shining through everything. Like, I saw consistency from the stars, like you kind of alluded to there with Foxy and Domas. They were consistently putting runs to an end that Milwaukee was having. Milwaukee put together a few good runs in this game, but the Kings had an answer for every single one. And the Kings went up by a good margin at one point before they really blew it open. And when Dame came down, and Damian Lillard struggled in this game. Like, he finished with 10 points, but he got like 5 points really quickly, and then there was a foul call that Giannis shouldn't have gotten. And what was nice was the Bucks were missing free throws, so
That's true.
Giannis didn't necessarily make his free throws. He went 1 for 2 from the line, but you got this sense of, we've been here before, we've seen this before. How are the Kings going to respond? And then Malik comes down and he drains a three, and then Domas comes down and he just puts the work on Brook Lopez, and right, just like that, like, this swing that you felt in momentum, that pendulum swung right back the other way. And that to me was huge in this game, because especially against a team like the Bucks, they're not the best team in the East, but they are still an absolute force to be reckoned with.
For
And
sure.
there are stars top to bottom in that team. And there's great role players too. And I think just the sheer effort that we saw from the Kings, it felt like a win that they needed to have. And I think that they felt that too, and that's why that urgency came out to get buckets to go get this win.
Yeah, on now following the Lakers game, we are 7-4 since the All-Star break, and I think now we're really starting to that they're starting to understand. And it's not like that they didn't before, but I think as it gets closer, each and every game just gets this added sense of importance. And the Milwaukee game felt like a must win, especially after the Houston loss, in terms of we don't want to lose. You can't lose multiple games now. Like this is it's too, if you're going to lose, you got to respond with a win and you got to keep stacking them as you go. And the Milwaukee one was important because they are the Bucks. They're the second place team in the East. They have two superstars, and Keon Ellis did a really good job of slowing down Damian Lillard and holding him to the points that he had. He was frustrated all game. And on the other end, Foxy was doing a good job hitting super tough shots. And Domas, like you mentioned, was putting the work on Brook Lopez. Like he what was it? He posterized him twice in very brutal fashion. I think what I'm really appreciating about Domas, especially post All-Star break, he's been taking it up a notch with his physicality and actually being a big who's scoring down low in a way that he kind of wasn't doing earlier in the season. And I've been finding that to be a really big boost to this team. Um, and when it came to the Milwaukee game, despite not having Keegan, I think our other guys did a really good job. HB did really well, hitting some tough threes. Kevin was hitting his threes to begin the game, and then Malik came out here and had another 25-point night. He was just setting the tone, and those are just our guys showing up again against that elite talent. And it made me confident that if, we've played well against this team twice. And although we didn't win the first time, even though we could have, that was in our control. So it feels like I'm not as afraid of the Milwaukee Bucks as I used to be based off of how we've been playing against them. This was just a great, like, as good as a team win as you could have asked for, especially with, missing pieces. I think Trey went out in this game too pretty early. So we were without him for most of the time too. So.
Yeah, and I think an aggressive Domas is going to be one of the keys to our success down the road here prior to the playoffs in terms of positioning ourselves. Um, when he is just dominating the game, and I say the game because he can dominate the pass game, the boards, he can do it on points too. Like when he is the go-to guy offensively, defensively, they're not under as much pressure. And Domas puts a certain level of pressure on any defense at this point. Like, I haven't seen a single team this year really find the recipe for stopping Domantas Sabonis. And there might not be a certain recipe because Katie Christensen actually kind of touched on it last night. She talked about how he's not athletically gifted in terms of like, he's super big, or like he doesn't do any one thing insanely well, but what he does do really well is he understands the fundamentals, and he plays a mind game out there too. Like he just reads the game, the floor, scenarios, everything so much better than everyone else, and that is terrifying for an opponent, because you're like, if you're Giannis, you're on the other side and you're like, I'm so much bigger than you, I'm stronger than you, I'm taller, like I can do all these things so much better than you, and yet you're still dominating my team right now.
Right.
Like that kind of a thing. The aggressiveness is what we need to see from Domas down the stretch to really position ourselves well and have sustained success.
I agree. And I alluded to this in previous pods. I do think that last year, despite Domas leading the league in rebounds, it was kind of his first true stint as a center in the NBA. And I do think that now this year he's gotten used to it, and it's gotten to the level where he's adjusted to the physicality that comes with it, and he's rebounding even better. He's understanding what he needs to do to get the job done while being that consistent force for getting the offense going. So I'm super happy for his growth this year, and I'm really excited for him to kind of shut those narratives up in the playoffs, because I don't think it'll be as dire. Even if it's a tough matchup, I don't think it'll be as glaring as it was last playoff run. So I was really
Yeah,
happy
well,
to
and
see it.
he has two hands now too, and as Doug
Exactly.
Christie would say, two hands. So that's always really helpful.
Yeah, and you can see it. Like, obviously it's not perfect, but he has that option, and guys have to respect that, because he'll go left like 6 straight times, and then he'll hit him with the right hook, or
Right.
a little bunny using his right hand. Like, that's the option that was taken away, that I think casuals will like to look away from when it comes to talking about Domas. And so great win in Milwaukee, and let's talk about the awesome win last night on ESPN against the Lakers at home. And again, second night of a back to back. Domas took it straight to Anthony Davis and is now 10-0 on him all time. And Domas came out after and said, "Hey, please stop talking about this." He's like, "It's a team game. It'll just juice the guy up, the other guy more. It makes it tougher for me," is what he said. And I thought that was pretty funny. So I was what I again, this is the second time that the Kings have swept the Lakers ever in the franchise history. Now, the first time was in 2015, 2016, so they were kind of butt then, so it was like the Lakers weren't that great then either, so but still, this is a hated rival for the Sacramento Kings. So
Yes.
it felt so good, dude. It felt so good to get this win.
Any
Um
any win against the Lakers feels awesome when you can have bragging rights that you swept the Lakers on the season series. As a Kings fan, there's honestly no better feeling in the world.
Yeah, exactly. Now the only like whenever they want to mention in the comments, they're like, "Oh, six champ or however many championships or whatever,"
Yeah.
and we're like, "Okay, whatever. That was you can live in the past if you want, but we've been the better team. The Kings have won in since the at least the De'Aaron Fox era. They've won 12 of their past 16 matchups against the Lakers, and if you narrow it down even more, 7 of their last 8. And since AD has gotten here, they haven't beaten us. So it's awesome to see just kind of knowing that we have the upper hand even against LeBron James and Anthony Davis. And both these guys were named All-Stars, and Anthony Davis in particular I'm going to pick at because our friend Liebert, he mentioned in the group chat after Anthony Davis had that 25-25 game against Minnesota. And, Rudy Gobert, Defensive Player of the Year candidate, right? Domas played well against him too, but they're like, oh, no one's had a stat line like AD before. And I was like, he's never going to do this against Domas. So I'm like,
Yeah.
he'll never be able to do that. And Domas, it was so great that they actually showed this because they were doing the whole ESPN thing. They were talking about it after the game, and they had the play where Domas backed down AD in the third quarter, just got it right up in his grill, and then AD went to the ground holding his face after. And I'm like, just get up, dude. What are you doing? You're not going to get these
Great.
weak calls. Like, that's our guy. And it just shows, like, that's the strength of the Lakers right now. He's supposed to be their best defender, and he can't handle our big man. So, it was a prideful moment, at least from a fan base perspective, knowing that our player is better than theirs. And um, LeBron did a good job trying to keep this team in it, but Foxy again did a really good job of quieting down runs. HB lit up in the fourth quarter, hit 4 threes. I was really happy about that. Anytime it felt like they were creeping up, HB shut it down. Foxy shut it down. Domas hit a tough shot. Um, Malik wasn't as good in this game, but Keon Ellis did a really good job starting in place of Kevin Huerter because we had Keegan in this game as well. And Keegan also had a very nice game. It was just felt like another great all around effort where everyone contributed. And I was really happy that, I wanted to see Keon and Keegan play together at the same time and just kind of see how that impacts our defense a little bit. Um, and we'll get into this in just a second because I wanna give Keon some praise, and I think Kings fans are really starting to take notice. Um, but in general, our defense was awesome, and there was times, especially when the Lakers were trying to come back in the fourth, where they gave LeBron like 2 wide open dunks, like real easy walk in dunks, and I was like, oh, and then Austin Reeves, who was hot all day, hits that 3 and it cuts it to 9, and I was like, oh, this might be the letdown. Everyone
That's that
starts worrying.
scenario I talked about. Yeah.
Yeah, but then HB hit a couple tough ones, and then after that we felt pretty good about it. So, I don't know if you had any major takeaways from this one because again, it felt like a lot of the same things from when we beat them the last time. So,
Yeah, it was expected, to be honest, going in. I did text you guys and I thought that this would be the one that AD like wouldn't necessarily win, but he'd be more dominant than Domas in, and I was just
yeah.
dead wrong. I'm glad I'm not a betting man because I would have lost all my money there. But he yeah, Domas in this one was dominant. Foxy was great. Like just top to bottom, it was a great team game. And I also think the coaching was pretty good too. He challenged when it was the right time to challenge, like on that block that
Oh, that
they
was
called,
awesome.
yeah, that they called on Domas, and it just turn right back around, and Domas's one block was on AD for that play, and it was a really good win. And it did also highlight, you kind of talked about it, Keon. He started again, and that was his 6th start as a Sacramento King, and also his 6th victory as a starter. So he is undefeated in the team game of being a starter. So is it time that we kind of talk about if Keon should be starting?
Sure. So the debate that at least so I want to take some credit for this in part because I kind of called this early on in the season. I was like, I like the Keon minutes. I've been loving the Keon minutes. And Keon, when you watch some teams that have like these winning players, like for the Warriors last year, it was kind of the Dante DiVincenzo, the Gary Paytons, like the guys who are out hustling everybody and who could contribute on the defensive end. The people have it in Josh Hart, like they think he's that kind of player. You kind of need that glue guy, and I think that's one of the things we've been missing this year. Keegan has excelled so much as a defender, but and Foxy is good when he turns it up, but he has the responsibility on the offensive end. So if he was just a defender, I think Foxy would also do way more than he's allowed to without the fouls and everything. But what Keon brings to the table in a way that Kevin Huerter doesn't is just like it just feels like our defense as a collective is better because Keon is just a naturally better defender. And I understand the argument with Kevin Huerter, like, oh, Kevin is a shooter. Kevin can get hot. But that hasn't been the case this year. Like Kevin has been colder than he has been hotter. And I'm not going to take away from Kevin because when we played him against the Bucks, he was hitting good shots and, you know, hitting threes in rhythm, and that's fine. But you could also do that coming off the bench. And I felt like we have enough firepower. I mean, we have enough firepower in general. Like we have guys who can get buckets on this team. But with De'Aaron Fox and Domas out on the floor on the same time, and Keegan Murray and Harrison Barnes, you can operate with Keon being one of your other defenders. I think having multiple 3 and D defenders on this team would benefit the overall success, and it takes pressure off of Fox because we watched the Lakers and Milwaukee. Keon took D'Angelo Russell and he took Damian Lillard. So he took the toughest guard assignments, and Fox could kind of not take a break, but not have to guard the toughest guy and be the guy who scores all the points. Um, I don't, and that's kind of my take on how I feel about Keon. I think that like with Kevin, it just his bad offensive nights don't outweigh like because he's so reliant on offense. His bad defense can't be relied on when he has a bad shooting night. Versus Keon, you're going to get good defense, and then he can come in, and last night he had 14 points. Like he can come in and do that consistently. And I think Mike is starting to notice, at least from the fans are at least starting to notice. I know Mike mentioned that he wouldn't make a change just yet, but I don't know if Keon. What do you think if Keon finishes strong to start to finish the year? If he's just like a huge present, do you think he'll do it? I know what you want. I mean, I'm assuming I know what you want, but our buddy Liebert is gonna die on the Kevin Herter hill until the season ends and he's no longer on the team, in my opinion. So
Honestly, the time to change up the starting lineup at all has passed. I think if you were going to make a change, it needed to be a few weeks ago. However, if you're still going to make a change to the lineup, it has to be now. And considering that Mike is pretty set on that starting lineup, I don't expect that to change. What I do expect to change is I think Kevin Huerter's minutes are going to start getting cut the more that he plays the way he's been most of the season. And we could see 15-minute games from Kevin Huerter, and we could see 28-minute games from Keon. But
right.
Keon can still come off the bench and be that 7th, 8th man rotation. So I would personally, I would love to see Keon in the starting lineup because you talked about it. Like everybody knows the Kings offense. I know they've gone they've regressed a little bit from last year, but they're still one of the most dominating offenses when they're rolling in this league. And there's just something to be said when you add a little bit of defense to that starting lineup, like and seeing Keon, like last night, I really watched after your take. I really watched him like with almost like a magnifying glass. And I'm watching him off ball, I'm watching him on ball. Like his off ball presence is there. He's not moving as much as Kevin Herter does, but that's, I think, just trying to find your role in that play. And obviously Kevin Herter, he started a ton of games with this lineup. Like dating back to last year, this was one of the most utilized starting lineups in terms of minutes played in NBA history. Am I wrong?
No, you're right.
Like,
NBA history, and it wasn't just last year. It was, and also they were the healthiest like starting five in a really long time.
yeah, so these guys know how to ball with each other. Like it's kind of untouchable in that regard. So you make any change to it, and it's going to affect the team, those starters, that starting team, in one way or another. But watching him last night, like his defensive presence, fantastic. He's got the length that Davion Mitchell doesn't have, but he's got the dog that Mitchell has, and he's got an offensive game that Davion Mitchell has started showing more of an offensive game lately, but
Not
traditionally and
consistent.
the rest of throughout his career, he just hasn't been consistent. So I see a stepping stone in Keon where he next year could be the starting guy for us. And I think that there's a really good chance of that because unfortunately, I don't know who's going to agree with me or not, but I don't think Kevin Herter is going to be on this team next year.
I agree.
Like he, we love the guy. We appreciate everything he's done for us, and he will continue to ball out for us at his best effort that he possibly can the rest of this year. But there's a weird thing that we see with Mike Brown and Kevin where they get along, but they don't understand each other, and they almost sometimes don't like mesh ideas. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't seem like it comes together at times. And when you're trying to make that jump from good to great as a team, everybody has to be locked in to what the coach, what the system, what the rest of the players are asking you to do.
Yeah, and it's again, like you mentioned, it's not Kevin's fault. It's just the style that last year it was fine because we wanted to. Our offense was our identity, so having an offensive player there made sense. But this year, when we're trying to adopt more of our defensive philosophy, you need guys who can kind of fill that philosophy. And we're seeing, Mike and Kevin, like the philosophies kind of go a little different. And it's not that Kevin isn't trying. That's also another thing. It's not like he doesn't want to be a good defender. Some guys just can't. Like it's how it goes. And he plays good minutes. He'll get deflections. Kevin does a good job sometimes. But man, there's just a level of consistency that we get to see when Keon's on there, and Mike gets to switch up the look again to free up his best scorer in De'Aaron and allow him to take some plays not off, but not as the main defender on the perimeter, and that just I think is a huge advantage to have, and it won't. And Mike Brown alluded to this. Matt George, from ABC Sacramento asked him that question. Saying like, "Oh, is there a way for Keon to get starting minutes?" And you and I had talked about this in a way with Malik Monk earlier in the season, and he kind of took that answer and kind of ran with it, saying that like you mentioned, Kevin's minutes will probably go down, and Keon will probably play more than Kevin on some nights, but Kevin will start for the sake of principle and because the starting lineup knows how to start together. Um, but yeah, he said that Keon's great, but it could be on any given night. If like Malik's just going off, then we're gonna run with him. If Keon's going off, we're gonna run with him. Or if Trey Lyles is having a good night, we're gonna run with him. So he kind of used that answer, but I guess it's a positive sign in the sense that at least he's acknowledging Keon more because Keon played well early in the season and then he gave him 18 DNPs during the year. So it's just like now I don't think there's any more room for him to do that. I think Keon's proved himself at least in that regard. So I'll take it
Yeah.
at this point.
No, I fully agree. And the last little point that I'll make that'll, if you as a listener are not already turning your tides and understanding that Keon should be, the starter going forward, or at least starting next year, this will this will be your reason why you do shift. The
I
game
like it.
of basketball is very much a game of mismatches, right? You try and get switches that are favored for an offensive player, and if you can't get the switches, like you move that ball around until somebody breaks down on defense. Now, when I look at the starting lineup for the Sacramento Kings currently, right, we got De'Aaron Fox, Kevin Huerter, Domantas Sabonis, Harrison Barnes, and Keegan Murray. Out of those 5 guys, the guy I'm picking 10 times out of 10 to pick on is Kevin Huerter. Why? Because throughout his entire career, he's shown that he's not a strong defender. He is an average defender, maybe a little below average, right?
Yeah, I'd do that.
But out of those 5 guys, who are you picking on? You're not going to pick on Domas. You're probably not going to pick on Harrison Barnes because he's got that vet experience, and you don't mess with a vet like that.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers tried last night. It didn't work out for them either, so.
Right. You're not going to pick on Foxy because he leads the league in steals, and you're not going to pick on Keegan because Keegan has shown he's one of the best one-on-one defenders in the league. So it's going to be Kevin Huerter. Now, let's sub Keon Ellis for a second to a guy who the last 2 games, they were moving the ball away from Keon.
Because they knew what he could do.
So at that point, you get to a point as an opposing team playing against the Kings where it's like, where's the mismatch? Like, all we can try and do is move the ball around and hope that somebody just breaks down. You're not going to take any of these guys 1 through 5 with Keon as a starter and please go one-on-one, because I guarantee you we're winning that matchup 60 to 70% of the time.
Yeah. And
that's my take.
And I agree with you. And it's not even just like, oh, who would we pick? It's we're watching these games and it's who these teams are picking on. They are picking on Kevin Huerter. They're going out of their way to attack Kevin Huerter. And there have been times where Kevin has been able to stand up and make a few plays, but at the same time, you fall victim to the same mistakes and Kevin will get picked on and eventually played out of the game, especially if he's not hitting his threes or his shots in general. And that's the part where I'm just like, man, if we gave Keon a little bit more of a run, if we gave him a chance to like build his confidence on offense, which it seems like he's doing more and more. The 6-0 as a starter, it is a very small sample size. Like, we're not going to overreact to being 6-0, but that even if it's a small sample size, it emphasizes that he plays winning basketball, that Keon Ellis is a factor to winning basketball. And it's hard to find players like that because there's guys who can fill up the stat sheet and they don't win. So it's having a guy who can make those plays and kind of stabilize your offense or defense. Like, that's kind of what you want. And I've said this in our group chat and I'll say it again, how I, just kind of put it out there. Kevin is the kind of guy who could win us a playoff game. If he gets hot one game, he could save a playoff game for us. But I think Keon Ellis is the kind of player who can save a playoff series for us, who could consistently impact the series without, even if he's having a bad shooting night. He could have, like last year, he could, like in this version, of course, I'm speaking, theoretical. He could have been that guy we put on Steph Curry versus, having to put Davion Mitchell or Terrence Davis. Like, that could have been the matchup. And who knows how that would have turned out, but that's the idea this year now that he's improved. That's my thinking behind it. That's why I really like Keon over Kevin. But again, if at this point, I'll just take more Keon minutes because I know Mike is loyal to his guys, and that's a good way to coach, because if you're going to bring more guys in, you'll know that, it's a sense of loyalty. So I understand, but I'm glad that, the fan base, at least Mike Brown too, is starting to come around on Keon. So.
Yeah, and we need him to continue to come around on Keon because I believe it's a winning recipe.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so let's get off this. I think, this was a good week. We got the 2 big wins against the 2 tougher opponents. Obviously, that we would have loved the Houston game. But let's take a quick look at the standings. I'm going to pull them up here real quick. Also because I want to check on the Dallas game. So Phoenix lost to Boston. They just got, there was just too much. So that helps us, as we are now a half game ahead of Dallas, because Phoenix falls to 8th, and then depending on if Dallas wins or loses, they're playing the Thunder right now. It's a 2-point game. whoever win if Dallas wins that game, they'll move up. They'll still be in 7th because we own the tiebreaker on them, and we'll have the less losses. So that's how they'll do it in that sense. But so we're sitting there. We're only a game back from New Orleans in 5th, and Denver is taking the top spot, like I kind of figured they would, and OKC and Minnesota are 2nd and 3rd, and the Clippers are 4th. So I wanted to run a playoff scenario by you. My dream scenario to how I think if we're going to advance even to the Western Conference Finals, or maybe even the finals, the way to do it. Because I actually think there is a feasible path if everything fell right for us. So tell me what you think. So I want New Orleans and the Clippers to be the 4 and 5 seeds. This is essential. Like they both have to be the 4 and 5 seed for this to work the way I'm dreaming it. And then Denver stays in 1st. Either OKC or Minnesota is the 2 or 3. I don't care. Whoever we get at 3, I'm good with either or. So let's take it as it is today, and let's pretend Minnesota's the 3rd seed, right? So we stay in 6. New Orleans keeps winning, and they keep 5th. So I love that. I'm totally cool with the 6th seed. We play Minnesota first, and let's say the goal is to win that series. So I'm pretending as if we won this series. So our next opponent after Minnesota would either be the winner of OKC or the 7th seed, which in theory today would either be Dallas or Phoenix. So it would have to be, what out of those 3 teams, I'm confident we can beat all 3 of those teams. And if most likely OKC has an advantage because they get the extra day of rest, because whoever's the 7th seed would have avoided the second game in the plan. So but that's still a disadvantage. And obviously Luka or, the Phoenix team, they could be a young Thunder team. I'm not saying that it's a given either, but I also think that we would be able to have kind of an advantage there, considering if one of the lower seeds wins, we get home court advantage in the second round. So if we just take care of business there, we either get the winner of Denver or the 8th seed, which would either be Golden State or LA, and I doubt that either one of those teams are going to beat Denver. And then let's say it's LA or New Orleans, that Denver, I think, would take on either one of those teams, thus effectively wiping out the 2 teams that we've sucked against this year. And then we, take our chances with Denver and see if we can beat a championship team. But we would still, in theory, make it to the Western Conference Finals. So that would be my dream path to getting to at least the Western Conference Finals this year. What do you think?
It sounds so promising when I hear you talk about it, but so many games this year going in have sounded so promising.
Yeah.
Obviously, like Kings bringing their A game, yes. Give me all those matchups the exact same way you just described it, because I think we would end up in the Western Conference Finals with a legit chance at the finals. And never in my wildest dreams, 40 games prior to the Western Conference Finals, would I have thought that they would have ended up there. So it would be a drastic change in the Kings. But yeah, I mean, all those teams above us, except for the freaking Pelicans, for whatever reason, everyone else we can beat. And we've actually won the series, except for the Clippers. I think, did we lose that series?
Yeah, we're we still have one more game, but we could tie it. So we could tie the series, but we lost the Pelicans, and I think out of the teams above us, that's the only series we've lost.
Yeah,
so we have a chance against LA.
The Kings bring it against those teams above us. And look, I would much rather finish a game better than I start a game, and I would much rather play way better against the really good teams than against the really bad teams. Because if you can just get into the playoffs, you keep that same recipe, you're on your way to a successful run.
Mm-hmm. So it was just like, I'm playing it in my head. So I'm going to be rooting hard for the Pelicans moving forward. And, I really don't care who we get versus Minnesota or OKC, because Minnesota, now that Cat's hurt, they might play a little differently now that Cat's gone, but they're going to try and play him in the playoffs. That's just the reality of it. And he's going to be coming off of meniscus and then trying to play full strength. That'll give us an advantage because he will be hobbled and a little bit rusty. So that's where, and I truly believe Domas would dominate Rudy in a playoff series. Like, people would think that Rudy does get played out of playoff series, and people, I think they kind of think the same thing about Domas when you can spread him out a little bit. Oh, put him against, a certain team and Domas can get played out. And I'm like, I just don't know. I'm rooting so hard for Domas and De'Aaron to just kind of show why they're all NBA players and remind everybody. Speaking of, after the Laker game, Brian Windhorst went on ESPN and he's like, oh man, we're everyone's gonna look pretty dumb for not making Domantas Sabonis an all-star. But he's like, it's okay because we'll reward him by giving him an all NBA slot. So I'm not really worried about that. But I'm glad that like people are realizing how dumb it was to put, two Lakers in there. Like LeBron, it makes sense. He's a fan favorite. He'll always be starting until he retires. But AD doesn't. I don't care. People remember AD for what he was in New Orleans, and they think like, he has a great game here and there, and his numbers would say that he's playing fine, like he's playing really well. But against the guys that you put him over, I disagree. So
just keep that same energy when Domas and De'Aaron are destroying your team in the
yes,
playoffs.
exactly. So yeah, so again, there's a feasible world. And again, listen, if we get fifth and we are playing the Clippers, screw it, give it to me. Like I will take it. I don't care. Like getting in the playoffs will be really important. Again, I want to avoid the play-in at all costs. It would be a good sign if we made a top six. Again, a consistency to us to kind of, getting this team used to making it this far every single time. That's what's important. So, I'm excited for what's to come because we have some favorable games and we have some tough ones that will continue to push us. So I know we still have 2 games against Dallas that'll really decide that play-in spot, and we, coming up. And I know we play Phoenix one more time. And I know we play the Clippers one more time too. So like it's
We
gonna
got the
be
Celtics in there.
and we got the Celtics and Knicks on the road in a back-to-back, and we're playing Boston on the second night. We need to win the New York game on Saturday, and we need to win that New York game as well. So again, we'll break those down a little bit more as we get closer. But I think, but I'm happy with this week. I'm happy that they were able to get the back-to-back against the Bucks and the Lakers. That was huge. Hopefully they can finish this week strong with a win against New York. So, any final thoughts on the Kings before we transition here?
Nah, let's transition.
All right, so we're gonna transition to some football, guys. Free agency. It's a new NFL league year is back, so we can talk some football. So there was, on my end, on the Philadelphia Eagles side of things, a lot of movement, and we're gonna save that for a little bit. But let's dive into the San Francisco 49ers, and let's tap a little bit to what's been going on with them. You want to talk about some of the free agency moves? Any news that you've heard? We can kind of dive into it.
Yeah, well, I'll keep it really short because there's not much to talk about. I mean, there's stuff to talk about. Don't get me wrong. This free agency has been a little frustrating because I think from a fan perspective, and maybe you can relate to this, Marcos, coming off of a Super Bowl loss, you want your team to, you almost feel like, yeah, we're good enough to get right back there, but we need that bump to get over the hump. You know what I mean?
Yes, for sure.
And the Niners last year, I still believe that was the best team in the NFL. I believe that they were better than the Chiefs. I just think that Mahomes was better than the Niners at the end of the game. And the Niners also didn't put themselves in a great position to win. They didn't capitalize on some things that they should have, right?
Right.
But we're done talking about that. Anyway, I really expected in this free agency for us to take a massive swing at somebody. And I wasn't exactly sure where, because this team has surprised me with a lot of their free agency signings and their trades in the past, just coming out of nowhere and being like, well, we don't really need to build that position. And then it makes sense later why we did. So let me start by saying this. Look, I was really excited when I heard the news that the Niners were signing Eric Kendricks. Nothing was ever official. It was just an unofficial agreement between the Niners and him and his agent. And right towards the end, where he was supposed to sign the contract with the 49ers, he had a sudden change of heart and decided rather than losing in the Super Bowl, I'd rather lose in the first round of the freaking playoffs with the Cowboys. So he is now a Dallas Cowboy. So I'm actually pretty upset about that. Not just because of the scenario, but I was actually really hyped to get him alongside Fred Warner, because
Right, right.
there's no telling how long Dre Greenlaw's injury recovery period will take. And just to have a guy in Eric like that, to you almost to have him on your team, have him play alongside Fred, which would have been a beautiful fit,
Mm-hmm.
and to then slowly roll Dre back, he like you can almost rely on that linebacker duo to just get you where you need to go, maybe get you all the way,
And then you have a
and then
rotation.
right, and then roll Dre Greenlaw back in when he's absolutely 110% ready to go. And so I was really excited. And if we'd only signed Eric Kendricks and nobody else, I'll get into the rest of the guys we signed, I would have been stoked. I really would have, because knowing who we just lost in the Super Bowl and knowing that that's an injury that, number one, some guys can't come back from. Like, you play again, but your step's gone in a lot of cases. Like,
Yeah.
you take a step back when you have the kind of injury that Dre had, and it was just so damn unfortunate that it happened. And now we're faced with this scenario. So Eric Kendricks, GTFO, bro. Like, I cannot wait to see you get annihilated in the
Oh, for
first round of the
sure.
playoffs. So moving
If
on.
that, honestly.
So the Niners, they added 2 defensive ends in Leonard Floyd and
Good
Chris
pickup.
Matos. Leonard Floyd was the best pickup of the free agency signings that I'm talking about here. He's an absolute baller, and putting him alongside or on the other side of Nick Bosa is something that was, I want to say, genius, because the Niners haven't had a edge rusher aside from Nick Bosa who's gotten over 9 sacks since 2012, and that was Alden Smith. And
Oh,
that's
wow.
so damn long ago. That was
Yeah.
12 years ago. So to now put somebody on the other side that you can now have to account for as the other team. Like, you're like, okay, I can't just put 2 guys over here on Nick. Like, I gotta account for Leonard Floyd. Like, this is a baller right here. Like, that's gonna put a lot more pressure on that quarterback, whoever the quarterback is on the other side. And I think he's an upgrade from Chase Young. I think Chase
Agreed.
was good while he was here. I wanted to see more effort from him. At times he took plays off, and I never really saw it live time until it was kind of broken down for me in film. And I was like, wow, like, he actually does lack effort at times. And that's something that is not an identity of this Niners team in any shape or form. Like, if there has been one consistent identity to this team in the Shanahan Lynch era, it has been consistent domination and intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't take plays off on this team. And if you do, you don't come back. Chase Young is not coming back.
Yeah.
Like, I can tell you that.
I think one
So
thing sorry to interrupt. I think one important thing for Leonard too is that he's durable, which is huge. That man does not,
yes,
I'm not going to say it, but you know what I mean. He's durable, and he was super effective. And again, he had 10.5 sacks last year. He's just, he was so consistent for Buffalo, and he was their top option last year. So like you said, he's just going to complement Bosa and provide another veteran presence that like you said, he's not going to take plays off. This guy knows exactly what to do. So awesome pickup. I was super happy to see it. Continue.
yeah, awesome pickup for sure. So then moving on, we also signed 2 defensive tackles in Jordan Elliott, and we traded for Malik Collins, which was a really good trade, a really,
Mm-hmm.
really good trade. So when I'm looking at these free agency signings in this trade, like, it's all on the defensive line. And I'm led to believe that this is a tactical move from Lynch and the Niners front office to to really build depth on the defensive line. And I think that's going to come down to that's going to be something positive to focus on as the season progresses, right? Because we saw a few scenarios this year where our defensive line got banged up and we stopped getting to the quarterback and generating as much pressure as we did, just because the guys that we were throwing in there, they were just expendable dudes. Like it to me, the focus going into this offseason was building depth, because honestly, run it back with majority of the core of this team and you've got a good shot at another title run. And I think Lynch, the front office, Shanahan, they believe that running it back with the same core is a very, very likely scenario that you're giving yourself a chance to win a lot of games and maybe go to the whole, take the whole thing. Obviously, it's been years and years since that's happened, but obviously you try and position yourself year in and year out, and they're in a position to do that. So building depth was key for these guys. I think that a lot of the guys that they signed probably could have happened in the second wave of free agency. And so I'm wondering, I'm kind of wondering, like, is John Lynch going to make another move? Like, it's hard to say, because there is a lot of positions that need to be filled in this team. Obviously, they haven't even touched the O-line, and that O-line is trash. I think I've said it before. Give Purdy a little bit more time, and I really want to see this kid sling it. So
I did have a question for you, because you made a good point about, and I agree, like, the moves that they made seem more like a retooling move. It seems like now their defensive line's kind of set. If they want to get a young guy, they can still do that, but they added a bunch of veterans who can boost the floor, raise the floor, especially with guys like, Javon Kinlaw was fine, Cleveland Ferrell was fine, but like, these guys could provide just as much, or probably even more, than what they had before. So I think those moves are good. And I agree the Eric Kendrick moves was kind of annoying. The funny part with that was he was Dallas's only move at the time outside of them snapping, re-signing their long snapper, which I thought was hilarious. So I was like, I agree with you. Like, yeah, fine. Go lose in Dallas. That won't be a big deal. But I know you guys are still there. There's been rumors that, the Niners might go for a safety, but I want to talk about the offensive side of the ball, because there's been some news there, and I don't know if you want to touch up on that, because I don't know. Are you guys actually going to be running it back with the same, outside of your offensive line? I'm referring to your skill players. Are you going to be running it back with the same group of guys? What do you think?
what I want,
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, what do
yes.
you want?
Well, there's two sides of this. What I want, I want to see the same offense run it back, because it's the best offense in the league. I
Right.
mean, if coached properly, this is the best offense in the league. And Kyle leaves me wondering at times, but really, like, top to bottom, I mean, there's so much firepower on that offense. It's insane. Now, what I think's going to happen, Niners fans are going to hate me.
Ooh.
Either Debo or Ayuk is getting traded this offseason.
You think so?
Yeah. It's and if I had to lean one way or the other, it's probably going to be Debo, because if I'm thinking about Debo right now, he's not going to get any better, and his health is only going to decline. He hasn't been the healthiest player in NFL history. You know what I mean? Like, he has struggled with injuries through his career.
Mm-hmm.
They've kept him down for periods of time. They've kept him down for key games. And so when I'm looking at, can you finish a full season? Can you stay healthy going into the postseason? Like, he's been banged up going into the playoffs for us basically 3 years in a row.
And he was banged up in the
And
Super Bowl too, right?
yeah, and mind you, every guy gets banged up. Like, it is football. But the style that Debo plays, he's going to continue to get banged up, and those injuries are going to start to affect him more and more. So if there's a time to trade this guy, it's now. And I don't want to. I really don't. But if I was John and I was at front office, like I think you got to make a deal and you got to try and get some youth in there, and then you got to sign Brandon Ayuk. If I think that is like the key to this offseason. It will be a successful offseason for me, in my eyes, if we can retain Brandon Ayuk. If we trade Ayuk, it better be a damn good return.
So yeah, let's touch up on that because obviously there was rumors that Debo to the Ravens, but then the Ravens GM was like, oh no, we're not talking. But there was a report that there was mutual interest between Brandon Ayuk and the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I thought that was interesting. And obviously Eric Armstead, who left the Niners, went to Jacksonville, signed a horrendously big deal. Um,
I'm crying right now. Don't mind me.
so, but when we
Just a
talk about
Sacramento hero. I'm sorry.
Well, no, you're fine. When we talk about Brandon Ayuk, uh, what I find interesting is they have the 17th pick this year, right? They have the 17th pick in this draft, which the first round pick is that's what you get for top players. Like that's a commodity. But the problem is 17th isn't high enough to say we're going to be drafting one of the top 3 receivers because Xavier Worthy is the name that jumped up the most, but he's not a top 3 receiver. You got Malik Neighbors. I know he's the main name. Marvin Harrison Jr. Like you got those two. If you're missing out on guys like that, then is Ayuk the better option? So I guess you touched that Debo was the one that you would trade if you had it your way. So do you believe that Brandon Ayuk is more valuable to this offense than Debo for the Niners specifically?
It's a really good question because I've kind of played with it myself. It depends on if Kyle is willing to look himself in the mirror and change up how he coaches a football game. We touched on it all last year. Like Debo was the key to Niners' success on the offensive end last year. And we saw it when he was out, when he was injured. Like couldn't win a game without him. Kyle uses Debo as an absolute decoy more often than not. And as a decoy, I think Debo is probably more dangerous than he is with the ball in his hand because he's drawing so much attention play in and play out. Like he's probably responsible for 500, 400 yards that Brandon Ayuk owns. You know what I mean? Like, and it's
Right.
just because he's drawing that attention away from Ayuk where Ayuk catches it in the middle of the field.
Mm-hmm.
So Kyle needs to look himself in the mirror and go, am I willing to shift my offense and focus on 3 guys, CMC, Brock, putting the ball in Ayuk's hands and Kittle? Or do I want to continue using decoy, like, all these different motions? Like, and look, Kyle is a freaking mastermind when it comes to the offensive side of the football. Like he knows how to use Debo. He knows how to use Brandon. He knows how to use all these guys, and he's had them now for years and years. And he this is his team. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
talk about minutes on a court, minutes on a field together. Like these guys have it together. But I think going forward, the guy's going to be Brandon. I think Brandon's going to be the most important to this offense. And it's going to happen if Kyle shifts his focus and adjusts to kind of his coaching style. Like he needs to shift his coaching style to, I think, to really, have a shot at winning a Super Bowl because it hasn't worked.
And I wonder too, like, it's not like you don't have a physical presence. Like, obviously, Kittle and McCaffrey are physical forces within themselves, but we've noticed a guy like Jawan Jennings be a guy who's able to like break tackles and gain those extra yards, not in a way that not comparable to Debo, but in a way where like maybe you don't have to completely shift away. I do agree that Brandon Ayuk is the more talented and the more useful of the two in terms of skill. So no, I agree with your sentiment with like how they should do it, but I really wonder if that's what they're thinking and if that's like the team dynamic, like if that's really, if Lynch would pull the plug and the other question is Brandon has been so like up and down about whether or not he wants to like really be here. I just feel like he would have already made his pitch. Like he's saying like, don't forget what you have here. Like, he's saying, but I mean, every receiver kind of does that to kind of boost themselves. So I don't want to take too much into it, but I do wonder, like, I just wonder if Ayuk has kind of thought about it. And it's not that the Niners can't pay him. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. And look, if I was Brandon, I'd be feeling like, why the hell aren't you using me as a wide receiver one option? Like at this point, like
Mhm.
it, he generates so much open space when he's running without the football. Like his route running ability is just top tier. He's
Top tier.
probably top 3 in this league, in my opinion, at route running. And I'd be feeling like, yeah, don't forget who got you here. Like, don't forget that I got 1,000-yard seasons and I'm still, on this deal. Like, and yeah, don't forget, like, Debo, he's done the same thing. Wide receivers across the league, they're divas, man. Like,
That's
wide
how it is.
receivers feel, yeah, they feel like they're the best on their team, to their system at any given, scenario, and you're never going to prove them otherwise. Like, they're the ones who finish the plays more often than not. And so why wouldn't they feel like that? So I kind of
Yeah.
get it from that standpoint. And I do believe that Brandon wants to be here. He's closer to his hometown being in San Francisco. Um, the stuff that has come out with his family and his friends on their stories and social medias and stuff, like, it really does. It is just part of the game. Like,
Right.
I guarantee you, Brandon probably said, like, hey guys, like, help me out here.
Like,
Kind of,
chill. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Let's
So,
get some movement.
right. So, I think it's gonna work out. I think Brandon's gonna get his contract, and I think Debo's gonna get traded. But
Yeah.
whether I think it's the best thing or not, like, it's gonna depend on the returns. It's gonna depend on so many things, and we'll talk
But
about it when it happens.
right, and I think logistically at the end of the day, I mean, you have a young quarterback in Brock that you might as well just give him his wide receiver one that you can build the system around in the future, because Kittle is eventually going to leave. McCaffrey's going to start slowing down here pretty
Right.
soon. So it's like you might as well build off of the one younger commodity that is consistent, that makes sense. So, but was there any other Niners news that you've heard outside of, kind of that?
Yeah, the last little thing I'll touch on is, the Niners have reportedly looked into strengthening their defensive backfield. Um, they're looking at potential starting safeties, including players such as Justin Simmons, Cam Curl, and Julian Blackman. Um, if if you want to build the safeties, like, those are the guys to get.
I want Cam.
Um, yeah, I'm sure you do. You guys are done, and we'll get into that in a sec. But yeah, I'm pretty confident in the secondary we have, just as long as they get healthy.
That's fair.
And I think people forget that we still have Talanoa Hufanga, because he went out so early last year, and we didn't have him all last year, and so we had a nickel playing, area that he wasn't familiar with at times, and, like, it is just Isaiah Oliver, for instance. Like, he
Yeah.
was so fresh, so green, and we're asking him to do so much. Like, there was, yeah, the safeties were weak, the secondary was weak, but you got to look at why they were weak. Like, we were missing an all pro. Like, so I think we're going to be okay in the safeties, whether we actually get somebody of a star, caliber there or not. I think we're going to be okay, especially now looking at that defensive line. And that might be why Lynch went the way he did in terms of building that D line first, and is because maybe he felt, I'm more likely to build a more dominant D line than I am a strong secondary based on the things that are available to me right now.
Right. No, that makes sense. Um, and it'll be interesting to see, like, if they do. And that's the problem. Like, the question is, like, where do you really want to invest the money? It's not like, again, it's not like they weren't trying at linebacker. So
Right.
it's like, and now the problem is a lot of the really, really good names are gone. And now the question is, do you build in the draft? A lot of offensive linemen have already been taken. Like, it is a kind of precarious situation moving forward for the Niners. So it will be interesting to see how they attack it over the next few weeks.
Definitely. All right, let's talk about your Eagles.
So, I've been pretty hyped about this, honestly. So, um, and we didn't touch on this last time, or at least I don't remember if we did. But Fletcher Cox retired. I know we talked about Jason Kelsey in the Friday Five, but then shortly after, Jason Kelsey retired. So, shout out to Fletcher for being one of the most consistent defensive players the Eagles have ever had. Just a guy who doesn't receive the same attention as Jason, and not because he's a bad guy or anything, but that's just kind of the person he was. So even keeled, show up to work every day, put on his pads, and just go to get to business. His celebration was one of a kind. This little crawl and then point, that was always fun. I love that. Um, but no, he'll be missed, and he was a part of the core four that got us that championship, and I will miss the hell out of him. But I personally believe that we were more prepared to lose Cox than we were Kelsey. So those were the retirements. But the Eagles have been one of the most active teams in free agency this year, and in really good ways. And let's start by, because I'm gonna say the best for last. We're gonna start with obviously the guys who kind of left that were important, that were part of the collapse last year. DeAndre Swift went to the Bears. Kevin Byard went to the Bears as well. Mariota went to the Commanders, and Nicholas Morrow went to the Bills, and Jack Stoll went to the Giants. So we lost pieces that we used, right? So that's one thing. Oh, and then we released Avonte Maddox as well. I liked him, but he was injury prone like crazy. So there was a chance that we could reunite with him, but that won't be until later. In terms of the guys we brought back Brandon Graham for his final season. He's already announced that it's his final season, so good for him. His retirement will be talked about kind of like Jason Kelsey in the sense of impact he had. We signed Alberto. We brought back both our punter, and we re-signed Jake Elliott to the highest paid kicker deal. He deserves it. He is arguably at least a top 3 kicker in the league, and the clutch gene just lives inside of him. He was probably our most consistent player last year when everything was falling apart. So I was really happy to see that. So we got number 4 for 4 more years, and then we gave Landon Dickerson the largest guard deal at the time. It was an extension for 4 years, $84 million, and I think it's because it seems big right now, but Landon Dickerson has already, in his first 3 years, have already gotten 2 All Pros. He is durable. He remains healthy. A huge part of what we do, and I think we were getting ahead of the curve. Like in a few years, some of these top guards are going to get paid more, and we're just signing Landon before he gets even more expensive because we could have waited till next year. So a couple of big names that we can get into. Actually, not big names. Let's do the lighter stuff. We'll get better. So we signed a linebacker, Zach Bond from New Orleans. Not sure what he's going to bring. He is a pass rusher. He's kind of an edge / linebacker hybrid. So we'll see. 1-year deal. We brought Matt Hennessy, who was a center, played for Atlanta most recently, but he was out last year due to injury. But he played in 2022. He has center and guard ability on the offensive line, but he's predominantly played center, which is important now in the post Kelsey era because Cam Jurgens is our replacement center, who was playing guard last year but was learning under Kelsey because he played center in college, but he hasn't been durable yet. So if Jurgens goes down, we need a reliable person who has played center, taking snaps at center, who knows what to do. So he is kind of like a good insurance policy to have there. And then we brought a wide receiver in Devontae Parker from the New England Patriots. He's a 30-year-old, he technically probably is our third best receiver because Quez is ass, and Olamide Zaccheaus is, I don't know if we're going to keep him or not, or what's the deal there. So Devontae probably walks in here as our third best receiver. So, but that doesn't matter given some of the moves we made. But we made some important moves on the defensive side of the ball. One at safety, we brought back the psycho CJ Gardner-Johnson. That dude is intense, and he brought that kind of swagger that was sorely lacking last year. And he got hurt last year playing for Detroit, but he brought the same thing in Detroit. A lot of energy, did the whole ski mask thing, got Detroit all in it, and it was hilarious. And he's the kind of person that vibes with the guys already. He already has that, he knows the culture of Philadelphia. So we signed him on a 3-year, $33 million deal, but his first year is probably only going to go up to at most $9 million with incentives, so it won't hit us that hard. And We signed outside edge rusher Bryce Huff from the New York Jets, who was a pass rush specialist a la Hassan Reddick, only more specific. He was a rotational piece, but he had 10.5 sacks last year. He, in terms of pressure rate for guys over 150 snaps, he led the league, and Micah Parsons was the next closest. So if there's a guy who can get to the quarterback, which is what Philadelphia Eagles, what Howie Roseman loves to bring to the table, it's that. And it comes with the speculation that Josh Sweat or Hassan Reddick might be getting traded at some point in the offseason. And if it were me personally, if I had to pick, this is kind of like an Ayuk Debo situation because they both played the edge. I would be okay with letting go of Sweat and keeping Reddick. Reddick he might be the older, but he is the more productive, consistent player. And Josh Sweat completely disappeared last year. Not that I don't think he's bad. I love his celebration and he is consistent, but it's just like Bryce Huff is 25. If he can be Hassan Reddick's eventual replacement, and then Nolan Smith can kind of come into place if everything works out that way. But I like the signing. 3 years, 51 mil. That's the most for an undrafted non-QB. Shout out to him. It'll be really exciting to see him. So, and then on the other linebacker front, earlier today, we just signed Devin White from Tampa Bay. There was the negatives on him was there's consistency issues. He was on the end of his rookie deal, and they weren't Tampa Bay wasn't extending him because they also had Shaquille Barrett, and they also had other good Levante David. They had good linebackers with them, right? So they couldn't extend everybody, and he was so integral to that Super Bowl team in 2020 where he put up like 140 some tackles and like 2 interceptions. Like, he was awesome. Like, so Devin White is that dude. He's 26 years old. It's not like he's bad. And he did deal with a toe injury towards the end of last year, and he just kind of lost favor in the defensive locker room. So bring him to a team that has 0 linebackers whatsoever, and let's put him as our main guy and let him go under Vic Fangio and see what he can do. And we only signed him for 1 year, $7 million. So it's like, not really. That's a true prove it deal. So if he wants to earn that money, he can totally do that. And now we have a chance to see what a real linebacker looks like, because we haven't had that ever. So that was a good addition to have. And I don't know if we're done in the linebacker department. I don't know if there's anyone else we can bring with him, or if we're going to try and draft a guy or try with Nakobe Dean. I'm not entirely sure. So, but in terms of at least for sure getting one guy, that was huge. I was really happy to see that, especially out of nowhere. So I was expecting a linebacker move, but I didn't think Devin White was going to be one of them.
Yeah, that was a big one.
Yeah, so I know I just rattled those off real fast. But those were all the main moves that we've gotten so far on the defensive side, and the re-signings, the releases, all that. I'm still incredibly sad that we retired Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox, but I do think that what Howie did this offseason was a really good response, like almost as good as you could do to deal with the fallback of losing 2 legends. And now we'll talk about the piece de resistance, the thing that drew the most attention, especially on the first day. Former New York Giants running back Saquon Barkley is now a Philadelphia Eagle. The man played over at Penn State. We signed him to a lucrative 3-year, $37 million deal, which could go up to $46 million in incentives. But Howie Roseman is a cap mastermind, and his cap hit will only be $3 million this year. So we're living pretty good. And so there's a lot of things, and Saquon I saved for last because his was the most important in terms of impact. Right now, we took a 49ers approach where we created a Madden-style offense with an elite-style running back who can do more than one thing. There's the pros and cons I've been hearing is a lot of the cons is, the Eagles have been able to do more with less because our offensive line is great and we have all these receivers. So you can get 1,000 yards out of DeAndre Swift. You can get 1,000 yards out of Miles Sanders. Sure. Yeah, I completely understand where we're coming from. So why spend big money there when we can spend big money somewhere else? And Saquon has an injury history. Like, oh man, can't stay on the field. I do agree that this is a very big boom or bust reality with Saquon Barkley, but when he's healthy, and over the past few years, he's played over 13 games in the past 2 years since he's recovered from his ACL injury. So I would like to say that he can stay on the field especially since he's not playing at the garbage dump that is MetLife Stadium, where everybody's tearing ACLs or popping their Achilles every other week. Um, and he gets to come over to Lincoln Financial Field, where he gets to cut on this nice grass that should keep him upright for most of the time. This was kind of like a two-pronged approach for Philly. Not only does it give him a dynamic running game to pair with Jalen Hurts, but it also all of a sudden puts this extra pressure, not pressure per se, but emphasis on Jalen Hurts, almost identical to Brock Purdy in the sense that you have all these weapons. Now you can't mess up anymore, dude. Now you
Hey,
need to be productive. This offense needs to be productive. So we brought in Kellen Moore to adopt his system, integrated. So now we have more than just an RPO, shotgun offense. We have a running back we can just put it in his chest and let him go, or we have a running back we can throw to in a similar sense like Christian McCaffrey. Now we don't have Kyle Shanahan designing our plays, but Kellen Moore utilized Tony Pollard really well and Austin Eckler. He knows how to get receiving running backs involved. So I'm hyped. I'm not gonna lie. I'm pretty freaking hyped about it. And
you
I don't
should be.
even 12 million a year for a potentially top 5 running back is not an overpay in my opinion. What'll make the value matter is how we use him. And if he stays healthy, of course. And I'm not going to pretend like that's the case for anybody. If all like we've been lucky that our 2 wide receivers have been mostly healthy like since they've been here, and Jalen has been mostly healthy. Like Dallas Goedert has been the guy getting hurt mid-season and then coming back after 4 weeks. Like it happens, but to have a truly dynamic running back, one that we haven't had since LaShawn McCoy, um, I just I can only see Saquon just like breaking a 50-yard run off of a broken play. And people keep in mind, like they want to throw out Saquon's statistics, but the man was running behind the worst offensive line in the league over there in New York. Like Daniel Jones is getting sacked, or Tommy DeVito or whoever. Saquon, they were like the 3rd worst for rushing, and it's just like, and I understand Jason Kelsey's gone, like that's huge, but even our current offensive line is
So much
significantly
better.
better.
So
Significantly
much better.
better. And our run schemes we can adjust now. We can actually incorporate zone runs. Like this is gonna be there's so much we can do now. And all of a sudden it turns into we also have a running quarterback. So how are you gonna stop this team? So what's your take? I'm curious. I want to know. What do you think
No,
about this?
the Eagles absolutely knocked it out of the park, to be honest with you. Every signing that they made so much sense. And I mean, yeah, coming off last year, it was the lowest of lows. It felt like, right? Because it was
Yeah.
just a crappy start to what was a awesome start, or sorry, a crappy finish to an awesome start. And so, vibes were down, and I'm sure Eagles fans, like you were probably feeling like, where do we go from here? Because who knows if who's going to retire and who's going to stay. And then obviously the retirings come out and you're like, well, crap. Now
Yeah.
let's see what happens in free agency. And, honestly, just the changes seen in that locker room for a lot of those guys is going to be enough energy that honestly, like you're bringing in new energy. You can almost shake off a lot of what happened last year and just build from there. So really tactical, really smart moves by the Eagles. And yeah, he's an absolute mastermind. There's no doubt about it.
Howie season,
One
baby.
of he's one of the best GMs in football. And arguably at times he's the best. So gotta tip your hat there. But the Saquon Barkley, that signing was eerily similar to the Christian McCaffrey trade that the Niners made, because you look at the team that Saquon was on with the Giants, they were shit. You look at the team that Christian McCaffrey was on with the Panthers, they were shit. And then they go to these established football teams who are established in a winning culture, right? The Eagles, yeah, they had a crap end of the year, but they were still a winning culture. And they've been a winning team for basically history, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so similar to look at these two guys, and I can't help but think that everything goes to plan. These two guys are leading the league in rushing yards next year.
Yeah.
And yeah, you alluded to it, like if there's ever a season where I'm going to critique the crap out of Jalen Hurts, it's this year. Just like anybody else should and could have critiqued the crap out of Brock Purdy last year if he played like dog crap. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm getting
Yeah.
animated here because
No.
it's the Eagles have put themselves in the Niners position of last year where you've completely tooled yourself and you've built stars at every level of every aspect of the game. There's no excuse why you should have a collapse, at least, that you guys had last year. That should not happen, barring injuries, of course. Like, this is a damn football team, and you cannot mess around with the Eagles this year. And that's frustrating as hell because I've got to deal with the Eagles now as potential NFC championship, NFC, number one team going into the playoffs. But dude, the Eagles look great coming out of free agency, and obviously there's still time left. They're probably gonna make more moves.
Yeah, after the Devin White signing, we still have over $25 million to use in cap space. Believe it or not, after all the after all the money we spent. So, and again, that's just part of Howie's job. And I do think, just like you mentioned, that it feels like Christian McCaffrey, both guys were labeled as injury prone prior to, at least Christian McCaffrey was labeled as injury prone prior to heading over to San Francisco and being durable. And I feel like Saquon isn't going to be he'll be a workhorse back, but he won't have to be the guy to do that all the time. So, and another thing is like more pressure on Jalen in terms of this is the chance to fix the weaknesses that he dealt with last year. Like, we struggled against the blitz. Guess what Saquon can do? He's the best pass protecting running back in the NFL last year with a bad team. So he understands how to pick up the blitz, and maybe Jalen won't feel the need to leave the pocket all the time, or he has a dump off option who can go pick him up 20 yards. Like, and again, Kellen Moore can hopefully shore up a few of those issues too. And it's going to be how they use Saquon that makes a difference. So I like what they did. I think people are like, oh, you need to focus on corners. You need to focus on this. And I get that. We have a few young corners. So we still have, I think its name is Kenny Moore. I could be wrong. He was the corner from Indianapolis that got suspended for the year, but we signed him. He's a slot corner. So it's like we have pieces, and we're still going to run with Bradbury and Slay and see if Fangio can kind of adjust in the system or just let these young guys run. I'm not sure exactly where they're going there. And CJ Gardner-Johnson, Reed Blankenship, Sidney Brown, like, we have young pieces now. So I'm feeling pretty confident. And like, we can draft now. All of a sudden it opens up that maybe on our 22nd pick, we do draft a guy. We do draft an offensive lineman for the future, or maybe like an interior lineman that can start now. I'm not sure. Like, all of a sudden with the signings that they made, we don't have to focus those on guys who aren't already established. So I'm hyped. I'm excited. It's interesting. I'll be interested to see what moves we make going forward, but it makes this draft that much more interesting. And again, we're going to see so much movement at the draft, and post June 1st. That's when the next kind of level of movement happens. So I'm hyped, dude. Free agency hit. NFL's back. That makes me happy. Always makes me happy.
Yeah, you have every right to be hyped. Honestly, it was a good free agency, and just an awesome week. Talk about bringing some positive vibes back into it.
Yeah, I think that's where this year it felt a little different. Like, and I kind of see it a little bit on both sides, like your side and my side. Like, the Eagles have reset, positive vibes. You're off of a collapse. You bring in new faces and some old faces and reignite the energy, versus the Niners. They lost the Super Bowl. Guys are talking about potentially being traded. Like, I feel where you're coming from. It's angsty. Like, it's tough. And Saquon alluded to this in his press conference, because they had a press conference today, and they talked about, he actually alluded to the collapse as the reason why he wanted to sign. He's like, this team was 11-6, and yeah, they collapsed, but they were 11-6, and they talked about wanting to be better than that. 11-6, and in the playoffs, he's like, I don't even know what that's like anymore. So he's like, I wanted,
Right.
That's a culture you want to be a part of, and same thing with Bryce Huff. That's why he left the Jets. He's like, winning culture over here, even when they struggled. So it's like, that's, at least outside folks still view the Eagles culture, and fans do too. So it's good to have guys who we were able to bring in because of that. So hyped. We'll see what happens moving forward.
Yes, sir.
All right. Any final takes before we close out our episode here?
Bang bang Niner game.
That's right. Fly Eagles fly. Light the beam, baby. We're in it. It's gonna get crazy. So when we get closer to the draft, we'll have an episode where we lay out of some of our favorite prospects that we're looking for. Or if we hear any more news in the trade front, maybe we'll go there. I don't know if Hassan Reddick or Josh Sweat will be on the team by the next time we speak. So we'll see what happens there. And for basketball, hopefully the Kings just get it done, beat the Knicks, and continue to ascend. And maybe they play out my dream scenario. That's all I'm hoping for, dude. So
I feel it, man. Let's do it. Let's light
yes,
the beam.
like the beam. So with that being said, this was episode 32 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on our social medias, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, Facebook, all that fun jazz. You can find us on YouTube if you want to watch us on video. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, follow, all that fun jazz. But I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. We will get back to you next week. I am Marcos Conan, and beside me here always is
Benny the Jet. Peace and love. We love y'all.
peace and love, guys. Peace.
Peace.